Hello, nature lovers. Do you love to read books like I do? I've always enjoyed reading books ever since I was a kid, especially books about nature. Unfortunately, as I get older, I find myself with less and less time to sit down with a good book. I've solved that problem with Audible. Audible allows you to listen to your favorite titles while you are driving, at the gym, taking a walk, wherever you are. With all the latest titles, you'll have quite a selection to choose from. And they have podcasts too. Start listening today with a free 30-day trial. To get your free 30-day trial, go to the show notes and click on the link. Happy listening. Welcome, friends, and happy World Rainforest Day. I'm Paul, and this is the Nature Wanderer podcast. Every year on June 22nd, we celebrate all that rainforests have given to us and the planet as a whole. World Rainforest Day celebrates the importance of healthy, standing rainforests for climate, biodiversity, culture, and livelihoods. In the celebration of World Rainforest Day, I dug into the archives from my wanderings down in Belize back in March to talk about the importance of the rainforest and all of its diversity. So sit back, listen to the birds and the howler monkeys in the background, and enjoy wandering with me through nature. Welcome, friends. I'm Paul, and this is the Nature Wanderer podcast. I do want to let you know that I am recording this ahead of time. I am still in Belize while I'm recording this, and it's being released a couple weeks after I've gotten back. But I wanted to record it here on the porch of the beautiful Airbnb I'm staying at in the jungles of Belize, because that's what I want to talk about, a subject that I have taught about for many, many years. As an environmental educator, I try to learn as much as I can about nature, and one of my favorite subjects is the rainforest. There's just so much to learn in the rainforest. I used to teach about it when I was a naturalist at the Buffalo Audubon Society. I taught about it when I was a naturalist for wild spirit education. I created an entire PowerPoint. I created a program, a hands-on program for wild spirit, all about rainforest and about all the things you get from the rainforest, some of the issues with the rainforest, in other words, how humans are affecting and damaging the rainforest. And I taught about what we can do to help preserve the rainforest. So I've done a lot of teaching about the rainforest, which means I've done a lot of research about the rainforest. And yet all these years of teaching, 30 plus years of teaching about the rainforest, I have never been there. It's always been on my bucket list, which is one of the reasons why when I saw a milestone birthday coming up, it's like, okay, I'm going to knock a couple of things off that bucket list. And one of the things that was on the top of the bucket list that I wanted to get off of there was visiting the rainforest, which I did a couple of years, but it was a different rainforest. We'll talk about that a little later. I'm talking a tropical rainforest. Now, I got closer this time, but there was something else on my bucket list I wanted to see, and that was Mayan ruins. I've always been fascinated with the Mayan culture, and I decided I need to find a place where I can do both these things. And that's when Belize kept popping up on my Google searches. You must go to Belize if you want to see rainforest and you want to see Mayan ruins. So that's where I ended up. Now, the rainforest in Belize is not a tropical rainforest. It's a subtropical rainforest, which I'll get into a little more detail about the difference in a minute. But I wanted to mention that I didn't hit the tropical rainforest, so it's still semi on my bucket list. If I never get there, I never get there, but I'm sure I will. So this is one of those things where I seem to feel like and know so much about it, but you can't really teach it with a lot of enthusiasm until you've actually been there. So you can share your experiences with others about what you saw there, what you visited there, what you've seen, all this fascinating stuff in the rainforest. So let's talk about rainforests. Let's get a little in depth with them. Generally, there are 3 types of rainforests. There are tropical rainforests. These are the ones that most people think of whenever they hear the word rainforest. I know when I hear someone say rainforest, first thing that pops in my head are tropical rainforests, where you see toucan Sam and all these other beautiful, colorful birds, and you see all the insects and all the plant life, and it rains there all the time, and it's very warm. That's a tropical rainforest. So that's the first type that most people think of. Then you have a subtropical rainforest. Now, the only difference between a subtropical rainforest is where they're located. So a tropical rainforest is located between the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn. The subtropical rainforest is a little bit further from the equator. So the subtropical rainforest you get outside of the tropics. It's still warm, not as warm. You still get rain, you still get the temperatures, but it's a little bit cooler, little less rain. So those are the subtropical rainforests. And then the third type, which most people don't even think about, is a temperate rainforest. Temperate rainforests are located in areas where it's much cooler, so you can get winter there. They're usually along the coast. For instance, most people don't realize that we do have rainforests in the United States. I know, you're thinking rainforest, tropical. We don't have the tropics in the U.S., but there is rainforest here in the U.S. I actually visited one a few years back. They're located around the western part of the U.S. Up in the northwest, up in Seattle area, there are temperate rainforests. The temperate rainforest is in this cooler region along the coast. So it gets the air currents off of the coast. It creates an area where it gets blocked by the mountains, and it creates a rainy atmosphere. So it gets all this rain there, which makes it a rainforest. Now, the rainforest that I visited was the Hoh Rainforest, just outside of Seattle, along the coast of Washington. So if there's 3 different types of rainforest, you don't need tropical climates. What defines a rainforest? Well, it's right in the name. It's a forest, first of all. You have trees there, lots of trees, lots of vegetation, and you have rain. Lots of rain. If you get more, and this is the definition, the general definition, if you get more than 100 inches of rain each year, it is determined to be a rainforest. So it's very wet in that area. Because it's so wet, you get a lot of growth. So a lot of vegetation, a lot of plants. Because you have all these plants there, wide variety of plants growing all over, you have shelter, you have food, you have a great place for animals to live, which is why you get a lot of animals in the rainforest too. It is so high in diversity. They actually say that the tropical rainforest is the most biologically diverse terrestrial ecosystem on the planet. Now, I stuck that word terrestrial in there for those who don't understand what that word means, land-based. If you listen to my barrier reef episode a few weeks back, I talked about how the barrier reef, the coral reefs, are very high in diversity. They actually have more diversity than the rainforest. But you're talking an aquatic system. Lots of different types of fish. Lots of different types of plants. In the rainforest, you do have a lot of diversity, a lot of variety of plants and animals. You have so many different types of plants that it can support a lot of different types of animals as well. Birds, tons of birds. I mean, I'm not in an actual rainforest where I am recording this. It is considered a jungle. We're just outside of the actual rainforest. It doesn't get enough rain here, but it is very similar to a rainforest. It's a jungle. They call it the jungle here. And because we have all these plants around, there are so many birds, so many different animals. I've spotted a lot of different animals just from the porch here. And I got my Merlin app. If you haven't downloaded the Merlin app for your phone, I suggest you do it. It's an app put out by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. The Merlin app will actually help you to identify different birds by either sight or by sound, or you can put a description in. If you can get a picture of the bird, it will do a pretty good job. Good luck in getting a good picture, but it will do a pretty good job of identifying it. But it does a great job with sounds, which is what I like to use my Merlin app for. It helps me to figure out what birds are in the area so I can start looking around and seeing if I can spot them. And especially if I go to a place that's new to me, if I start wandering further. For instance, when I wandered here to Belize, I didn't know what birds were here. I did some research ahead of time, and I was like, okay, we got these birds. I want to see these birds. I want to see the parrots. I want to see... But I didn't know all the species of birds here. So I turned on my Merlin app, and I started listening. Well, the app started listening to all the different birds. I was listening too, but it was picking up some birds that I didn't hear until I started listening more carefully for them. And there were some birds that I was hearing that it's like I have no idea who that is. The one morning, it picked up about 30 different species of birds. Most of them, probably about 80-90% of them, I had never heard or seen before. Some of them were some common birds that I get up in the States, but most of them were birds I had never heard or seen before, and it was really fascinating. And the reason there were so many different kinds was because of the biodiversity down here, in the jungle, in the rainforest. So this is a subtropical region here in Belize. Subtropical rainforests are throughout Belize, and I did visit a couple of them. The other day, I went to, as a matter of fact, it was our first day on the mainland. We started out our vacation, my wife and I, that's why I keep saying we. We started out our vacation out on the Keys, Key Calker, and I visited the barrier reef, the coral reefs. Saw quite a bit of diversity of fish and plants while we were snorkeling out there, but then we headed on to the mainland. On our way to Cristo Rey here, we stopped at it was a national park, but it's not like a national park like we have in the U.S. It was rather small. We actually did the 3 trails that they had, and it took us probably about 2 hours, and that was taking our time, enjoying the sights, listening to the birds, going down to the river. But while we were at this national park, it was considered a subtropical rainforest, the edge of it. And we saw so many different plants, we heard so many different birds, and we actually saw a lot of biodiversity here. But where I am now, in my Airbnb in Cristo Rey, it is jungle. They don't get enough rainforest. It looks exactly, well, pretty much exactly, like the rainforest that we did visit on the way here. The biodiversity is just tremendous here. Lots of animals, even though there's houses. There's a small town that we're in, Cristo Rey. You can walk down the street and it looks like any town, but you go a little bit further and there's just a road leading out of town with nothing but jungle on both sides. And as you get further south, we did a trip further south and we ran into rainforest. They get enough rain in that area. And they also have rainforest up in the northern part of Belize as well, because it rains more than 100 inches. But because we're outside of the tropics, it's considered a subtropical rainforest. Now, we are in the dry season right now, so the rainforest, it wasn't like it was raining, but there's still a lot of diversity in plants and animals there. Now, a lot of times when you're in a rainforest, whether it's a temperate rainforest or a tropical rainforest, a lot of times you hear the wildlife, you hear the birds, but you don't see them. And it's not just because it's so dense and thick in the rainforest, all the plant life there. It's also because there's layers in the rainforest. Most people, when they visit the rainforest, they get the chance to see two of the layers. And if you look up, you might be able to see the third layer. But there is a fourth layer that very few people get to see. So let's start at the ones that we get to see. We'll start from the bottom and work our way up. The layers of a rainforest. Okay, of course you have the forest floor. And there is a lot of life down here. But if you're like a lot of people, you're always looking around to see what's around you, and you often don't look down. Now, I do hike with some people who they just look down and they miss everything around them, but they get to see what's down there on the ground, on the forest floor. They're mostly worried about tripping over a rock or a tree root, but they get to see what's down there. I have to make a conscious effort to look at the ground, to lift over rocks, to lift up a log, to roll over a log. Always put it back when you're done. This is someone's home you're disturbing. But I like to look at these things to see what's underneath, to see what habitat some animal has created for themselves under that rock, under that log, or just wandering around on the forest floor. So there is a lot of life that happens on the forest floor. And then the next layer up is what we call the understory. Now, you have to realize you're in a rainforest. A lot of the moisture in the rainforest is held in by the trees. So the tree cover over you is so dense that it often looks very dark in a rainforest. You don't get the sunlight beating through. But there are plants that will grow in those tiny little patches of sunlight. And there's plants that grow in the shade, too. They're made for growing in the shade. So that's your understory. Now, a lot of times you get mosses. When I went to the World Rainforest in Washington, I visited the Hall of the Mosses. It was just this huge area where there was so much moss hanging off of the trees. Sometimes you couldn't even see the tree, but it was almost artistic. It was absolutely beautiful, all these mosses there. So you get all these plants growing in the understory. And a lot of animals depend on those plants as well. Then you have the third layer, the next layer up, and that is what we call the canopy. That is the roof of the rainforest. That's what keeps a lot of the moisture in. That's basically these tall trees, very few branches down below, very little green coming off of the tree below the canopy. So it's this big tall trunk going up to get where all trees are trying to get, up to the sunlight. They need that sunlight to survive. So these trees are growing nice and straight up to the canopy, and then they spread their arms, their branches, to grab up as much sunlight as they can. That is the canopy layer, and that's what blocks a lot of the sunshine from coming down into the rainforest. And it also holds a lot of the moisture into the rainforest, allowing all these understory plants to grow, to survive. Now, up in the canopy is where you do have a lot of the bird life and a lot of the mammal life. Up in the canopy is just an activity of life. You have so much going on up in the canopy. So if you're walking through the rainforest, you'll probably hear a lot of birds and you may not see them because they're up in the canopy. The monkeys are up there. A lot of insects are up there in the canopy. So when scientists are studying the rainforest, a lot of them, when they want to study the wildlife in the rainforest, they head up into the canopy and that's where they study it. Now, there is one more layer of the rainforest that most people don't really think about, and that's what we call the emergent layer. These are the trees that go a little bit higher above the canopy and they emerge out of the rainforest. And you do have a lot of life up there as well, but very few people visit it. You can usually see it from up above if you have a drone or you have or you're flying over in an airplane. So that's the emergent layer. So your 4 layers, starting at the very top, emergent layer, then the canopy, then the understory, and then the forest floor. And there is life, and different life often at each stage. There's just so much going on in the rainforest, so many unique things. So let's talk a little bit about the 2 rainforests that I have visited. First of all, we have in the state of Washington a temperate rainforest. I visited a couple years ago. I went out west, visited a lot of the national parks up in the northwestern U.S. My wife and I went with my brother, and he was planning most of the vacation. And I told him, I says, I have one request. I want to visit a rainforest. I've never seen a rainforest before. And even though it's not tropical, it's a rainforest. I want to visit a rainforest. So he put it on our itinerary, and we did visit the whole rainforest. When we went there, it wasn't quite what I expected. But once again, I had in my head tropical rainforest, like most people do. And we went to the whole rainforest, and it wasn't tropical. It was beautiful. There was a lot of diversity there. There were a lot of plants, but you didn't have the brightly colored birds, and there wasn't as much diversity. It was still awesome. I really enjoyed seeing it. So it was quite moist in this rainforest. Matter of fact, the one lodge we stayed at had a trail that went through part of the rainforest, and we happened to hit the right time of day where there was nobody there. My wife and I went through, and it's just amazing the size of the trees in there. And there were some trees that were just stumps, but there was life growing off of these stumps. I mean, life just had to continue here. You could tell. It just couldn't stop. And it was very moist there. The ground was moist, lots of mosses. In one area, we tried to stay on the trail as much as we could, but the mosses were actually growing over the trail in one spot, and it was like walking on a sponge. It was just so soft. There was a lot of plants on all layers of this forest. Much different than the rainforest we just visited here in Belize, which is a tropical rainforest. And you could actually see some of the birds flying through, the colorful birds, the parrots. We saw some macaws. We saw a toucan. Lots of colorful birds. And the insects, it just kind of blew me away. You know, we are in the dry season here, but there weren't any mosquitoes. There weren't any biting insects. We had a lot of butterflies. There were some insects that we saw on the ground, like a millipede and some moths, and there were just no biting insects that we had around. I was told later that during the rainy season, when it gets more moist, you do get a lot of the mosquitoes and a lot of the other biting insects. They do have them, it's just not year-round. Now, there seems to be in the Belizean rainforest more diversity than in the whole rainforest. But remember, we're in a subtropical region, so it stays warm year-round here. The plants can grow year-round. The wildlife can stay here if they want to. Not like up in the whole rainforest, a temperate rainforest where it does get cold in the winter and life kind of slows down there. Some of the birds will migrate, some of the animals will bunker down for the winter. So they do have different climates, which changes the amount of biodiversity. But both were very interesting rainforests, and both were actually very beautiful. So I do recommend, if you get a chance, visit the rainforest. You'd be amazed at what you see there. It's so much different than what you study in books. So I'm just so glad I had the chance to do that, so I could just enjoy learning firsthand and seeing with my own eyes what I've been teaching about. Now, I still do hope to get to a tropical rainforest because there's going to be even more diversity there. I mean, there were similarities between the Hoh rainforest and the Belizean rainforest. There were a lot of waterfalls, there were a lot of plants, there were a lot of animals. It's just not as much up north because of it. It was a temperate rainforest. It wasn't as biologically diverse. And the animals, of course, are going to be different too, because you have birds and animals that only really like the warm weather, kind of like I'm getting. And in a tropical rainforest, you're going to see a lot more variety. And if I ever do, I shouldn't say if, when I get to visit a tropical rainforest, I'll report back on the differences between the three different types of rainforests from what I learned firsthand, not just from books and movies. So I encourage you, get out, wander through nature more. If you get a chance to visit a rainforest, if you don't want to go to another country and you live in the U.S., just go to the West Coast, Northwest, and visit some of the rainforests there. And even if you live in the eastern U.S., believe it or not, there are rainforests in the eastern U.S. Along the Appalachian Mountains, there are areas of forest that receive 100 or more inches of rain, so they are considered a rainforest. I've been through the Appalachians before. I've visited some of the forests, so I've probably actually visited a rainforest many years ago and didn't even realize it, because once again, always thinking tropical when I hear the word rainforest. Well, now hopefully you understand the difference and your mind won't go to tropical as soon as you hear the word rainforest, and it'll go to maybe temperate, maybe subtropical. Yeah, there's a lot of different kinds out there. Well, it looks like we're just about out of time. I'd love to talk more about the rainforest. Like I said, it's a favorite topic of mine. I enjoy learning about the rainforest, and I enjoy teaching about the rainforest. But unfortunately, we're out of time. I hope you enjoyed wandering through nature with me today. Don't forget to invite your nature-loving friends to join us. If you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button. Take a minute to rate and review the podcast. If you have any questions or ideas for future episodes, I've got a list of ideas, but I want to teach you what you want to learn about. So please send me some ideas for future episodes. Just drop me a DM on my Instagram page at the Nature Wanderer, underscores in between each word, or on my website at naturewanderer.org. You can also support the podcast by joining my Patreon, which will also give you extras, including some extra videos. I have education classes on there. I post pictures and so much more on there. Show your support of the podcast and your love for nature by supporting a Nature Wanderer t-shirt or a water bottle, maybe a backpack, or even a puzzle. There's so much merchandise that you can buy in my store. It's linked in the show notes, or you can get there from my website as well. And above all, have a great week and keep exploring the nature around you.